Hello, my name is Michael Portas. I'm the Superintendent of Schools for the Pequannock Township School District. I'm here today with the principal of our middle school, Mr. John Seborowski, and our topic for today's podcast is juggling the roles of educator and parent, which is something that we both live that life. And it's funny, Mrs. Noon, who is our technical superstar, is also a fairly new parent. Her child will soon be turning 1, so this is a conversation that I hope that she feels deeply invested in as well. And even if you're not an educator, we believe that this is something that you might find compelling about conversation about your role as parent. And I'll admit, all the jobs I've had throughout my life, hardest one is being a parent. I'm very lucky. I have 3 boys who are all wonderful young men, and they're a little older right now, so it gets in its own way negligibly easier as they get older. But something I think about a lot. We talk about it quite a bit, and really this podcast is an extension of conversations that we've been having for years that we hope prove to be relevant for our audience. And I very much appreciate that you can meet with me today. Full disclosure, it is a Friday in a middle school. I just filmed a podcast with Ms. Ringen, so if it looks like I didn't change my clothes, it's because I didn't. But there's a very good chance we'll get interrupted because it's Friday, and that's what's supposed to happen on Fridays in schools. But Mr. Seborowski, I thank you very much for taking the time to meet today, and I hope you have a lot of fun with this. I know I've really been enjoying these as well.
Sure.
Excellent. So first question, which is not a question, is can you talk to us briefly about your career path as an educator and your career path as a parent?
Sure, and thank you, Dr. Portas, for inviting me to do this. I'm excited to talk for a bit about this topic. So my career path, I guess I'll start educational. Education path wasn't a common one necessarily. I was actually a sport management major in college for the first 2 years in college, and I very much into sports, loved it, maybe wanted to work in the front office if I could of something, some team. And it just, as more and more time went by there, I kind of got a little nervous that it was a tough field to crack, and I kind of had cold feet. I played baseball in high school and college, and I wanted to coach after that. So I figured, you know what, education, that would get me into the door with the school and working with kids, and that's how I became an education major. And I was a high school English teacher for a number of years, and some people set out looking to become a principal at some point or administrator at some point, and that was never my goal. I loved English, I loved working with literature with Yep. kids, and then just one thing led to another. I was asked to apply to be an academic dean, a supervisor. Then I was the VP here in 2014, and then I was fortunate enough to become principal in 2019, and that's kind of the story there. My path as a parent actually is I always knew I wanted to have children. I actually am one of 5. I have 4 sisters, and we grew up in a small house in Jersey City, with 1 bathroom. So I come from a relatively well, that's why I went to college down in Florida. I had to get away from all my sisters.
Got it.
But no, we grew up not a big house. Big family, so I always knew that I wanted to have something similar to that.
Yep.
So my wife, Kate, and I are blessed to have a 13-year-old son, Evan, who's an 8th grader, and an 11-year-old daughter, Kylie, who is a 5th grader, and they keep us busy. They're involved in a number of different activities, so when I'm not here at PV, I'm usually carting them off to practice, games, all sorts of things, and it's definitely been probably the most rewarding experience of my life. As you shared a few minutes ago, just being a parent, there's just something special about it.
Absolutely. It's funny you mentioned about the career path too. When I was in a program at Montclair State to get my principal certification, I used to tell my wife all the time, well, I'm never going to use my principal cert, but I just want to have it just in case opportunities arise. And lo and behold, look where I am now. So it's funny how our career paths take us in directions that we didn't necessarily anticipate, and then we end up in roles where we kind of feel good about what we're doing, and it's funny because it comes back to having that positive impact on kids. And I'm already going off script, which is par for the course, so you just have to work with me on this. But how we become so invested in trying to help shape meaningful experiences for kids, and then we start to realize very much that the lines get blurred between our kids that we have at home and then the kids we work with here. And I think that that's going to be at the center of a lot of our conversation about how like you learn from one experience and how it informs the other. Mm-hmm. In my head, I was going to craft that as a question, and I totally didn't, so I apologize. So on to the next question. How do you think your experiences as an educator have influenced your work as a parent, and vice versa?
Well, it's interesting. Again, this is my 24th year in education, and I said my oldest child, my son, is 13. So for for a good amount of time, I was in education, both as a teacher and as an administrator before becoming a parent. Yeah. And it's really one of the things that I try to do, and something that when I had my son, my daughter, it did change me as an educator. And I come into the building, and have done so for years now, every day, and I always say to myself, what would I expect my children's educators to do, be it their principal, be it their English teacher. What would I expect them to do? And that's what I try to do here every day. I always try to keep that at the forefront of everything that we do here, as do our teachers, who are parents themselves. I know that's something that you and I have spoken about a number of times. I've spoken to many of our teachers about that. And it's important. We all want, our children are our most prized possession. And we want to make sure that they're being taken care of every day. Whether it's 7:50, 8:30, whenever you drop them off to school, you want to know that there are people in that building who care about them, who want to help them become better people, and that's really kind of given me helped to form my philosophy since I became a parent as an educator.
Yeah. And we've talked about this too, that I look at my career in 3 stages. There was before I was a parent, there's when my oldest son was born, and then there was when my oldest son started kindergarten. And I was a much different educator as a consequence of those experiences. And I think it really helped me. And I tried to keep this in mind as a teacher, and this is what you just said, as well as when I was a supervisor, which I did very briefly, and then as a principal, and even now as a superintendent, is I try to keep in mind that people are trusting me with the most important thing in their world. And the decisions I make are going to have an impact on their lives. And the decisions I make aren't always popular ones, and it's not always what people might necessarily want, because I also have to be true to the expectations, policy, whatever else. But to at least provide that personalized touch. And you said something about sending to people who care about your kids. And this is something that is significant for athletics, it's significant for academics, it's significant for school security, mental health, knowing that people care. And for you, how is it that you feel like you demonstrate to the kids, I care about you? Because you're not going to pull somebody aside during lunch break, just let you know I care about you. I go back to having your tater tots. But how is it that the kids know, this guy cares about me?
Mm-hmm. It's having conversations with students before they get to the office. It's trying to be, whether it's in the hallway, in the lunchroom, different activities that we have being involved, whether it's the canteen night, social events, or 6th grade fun night with the kids in the beginning of the year. I ran one of the stations that night, and we did trivia. And so I was, reading off trivia questions, and those questions, and hearing them laugh, and I'm laughing, they see me in a different light. Yep. It's important, and just like with Ms. Ringen, it's the same thing. We work with kids in a defined role, in that we have to. There are times we have to have serious conversations with students, uphold the code of conduct, things like that, which are not always the most pleasant of conversations. But it's important for the kids to know that we're not just here for that. We're here to because, like you said, because we care. And, it's having those simple little conversations, even just in the hallway. If a student is involved with something outside of school, they have a game this weekend, or they have a competition, something like that. Just a quick little 10-second, even, hey, how'd it go? That means something. Because, and you know how I know? It's because when my son or my daughter comes home and they say something, I'll ask them, how'd the day go? again,
Fine.
I'm lucky if I even get that. It's pulling teeth. But if I do get something out of them, there's been more than one occasion where they'll say, yeah, Mr. So and so asked me about baseball this weekend, and I said, how did he even know? He said, well, he asked if anyone was doing anything fun this weekend. So it's little. It may not seem like a lot, but just taking a little bit of time to do that. Yeah. And again, that's what the teachers and I will work on here. We talk about that culture and that it's not, we're not just about the academics here in the building. That's why we're here, certainly. Yep. But it's about educating the entire student.
Yeah, and you make me think of one of my interview questions that I'd like to ask people is, why are you in this profession? So why are you a high school English teacher? Why are you an elementary school aide? Whatever it might be. And so many times it comes back to teachers who inspired them. A lot of times too, I'll hear parents who were in education. It's like children of educators become educators. It's very common, except apparently in my household. But it always comes back to that defining characteristic of that teacher who inspired them was I knew they cared. And I think it's a good message to repeat for the educators who might be watching this, that when you ask kids how they're doing, when you talk to them about their interests, it really matters because it shows that you value who they are. I know as a high school English teacher, I used to stand in the hallway, and I loved the location when I was at the high school here of I was right at an L in the hallway, and I could see down this hallway, I could see down this hallway. And it's a great way, first of all, to manage conflict before it emerges, because the hallway's a little bit unstructured, but also to start to get a read on the kids before they come into the classroom, because their body language, facial expressions might be telling you, he's having kind of a tough day. And you might pull him aside before class starts, like, hey, you doing okay? And whatever that 2 to 3 second response is, you can kind of read that and factor that into how you interact with them over the course of the lesson or the day. But also to remind them, like, I'm here, I'm looking out for you, like, I got your back. And you got to it too. Like, there are times where we have to mete out consequences, and you don't do that because you want to drop the hammer on a kid. Like, you take no joy in that, but you realize, like, people have to understand that for every action there's a reaction. And so, if you did something that was inappropriate, well, here's what's going to follow. And that's the same with our kids as well. Like, no one takes joy in taking away your kid's Xbox privileges, but you understand, like, there are certain standards that have to be upheld, and the consequences are somehow naturally fit into that. So, pretty interesting, crossover. But it's funny too. I'm sure that anybody who has children is familiar with that too. How was your day? Fine. What'd you do? Nothing. Like, really? You're in school for 7 hours. You literally did nothing? That's fantastic. But.
And if I may too, any PV parents are listening, if your child comes home and says basically that, I can assure you that we do plenty here in the building during the day. Just putting it out there.
Yeah, it's not 60 minutes of silence. Like, we're gonna have a stare down, guys, and that's the long and short of it. Yeah, and kids determine how much they want to share with you, and where you are with your kids' ages too. Like the younger kids tend to be open books. Like they come home and you ask them, what'd you do during recess? You're going to get a pretty comprehensive report. And you're like, wow, was recess 3 hours long today? No. But they go through stages. And in middle school, they're a little bit less apt to share that openly. And it does get better. And I know as my kids got later in high school, they were a little more willing to share things. And you just have to wait for your spots. And it is a struggle sometimes too. My wife and I used to talk about it, that the boys don't talk to us. It's a good point. They will eventually. So my next question is, what's the biggest challenge you found in managing the work-life balance as an educator parent? And just as a caveat, as I was generating this question, I was like, oh my God, this is a really hard question. I don't know how I'd answer it. So, hey, good luck, fella.
A couple things come to mind. The first is trying my best to be present for both groups. Trying to be at some PV basketball games after school or volleyball. You pick the sport, soccer.
Yep.
but also making sure that I get my kids to their own practices and their own games, because for every game or practice that our Pequannock students have here, my children have the same thing. Again, they're very heavily involved.
Which is great.
Absolutely, absolutely. We keep them involved in every season, and it's not just sports. They both play instruments, so there's concerts, things like that. There's always something going on. So that's part of the challenge, and because again, something that drives me with that is to, I try to be present here for the kids here, outside of school hours. I try not to miss an event. But something that I recall from my own childhood is that, my father worked 10 to 12-hour days, 5 days a week. He worked all day. And I can tell you right now, outside of my college games, because that was in Florida, he missed one game. I distinctly remember him missing one game throughout my, and I played a lot of games. And that I definitely recognized that then, and looking back on it now, all these years, that really took some effort on his part.
Yeah.
My mom was there too. Don't get me wrong. But my mom was a stay-at-home mom, so she was taking care of all the kids. He had a pretty set schedule, though, work schedule, and somehow he always got there to my games. And that's something that I want to do for my own children. So that's it's a challenge. It was a little easier when they were in kindergarten, first, second grade, but now that they're heavily involved, Evan's going off to high school next year, it's challenging. So these next 4, 5, 6 years will be a challenge. I imagine that when they leave high school, then I will have a lot more time to be able to come to all the PV games and things like that. But so that's a challenge. Another thing is, and this was a little hard for me at first, is that I was in middle school for a number of years before my own son was a middle school student, and believe it or not, I was very nervous about him going to middle school.
Oh, yeah.
I knew exactly what to expect, and, knock on wood, there really haven't been many surprises. It still didn't make me any less nervous and worried about him, and is he going to be okay at lunch? Is he, with his locker, everything like that. And I'll have the same worries about my daughter, too.
Yeah.
But it's understanding that, we're different, we live in another district. I can't compare the two.
Good point.
I can't compare that. At first, I did, and it's not fair because every district is different. I mean, even every school can be is a little different in each district, and what one district's needs or beliefs are maybe a little different than another community's, and that's fine. That was one of the balances that I had a little difficulty, getting used, because I know what we do here, and listen, we don't do everything perfectly here, not by any stretch of the imagination, but there are times when I wish that maybe, my son and my daughter would have some access to some things that we do here, Now, with that said, I've also stolen one or two ideas from their district too. So
good practice.
So I would say that those are probably two things that I've found challenging and tried to find a good balance for.
Yeah. As I was jotting down notes as you were talking, and I hope I didn't interrupt you, I almost said like an amen, brother, when you said about being present. And I love the line, wherever you are, be there. And it was a criticism my wife had. I don't know if it was when I was a principal or when I first started as superintendent, and it was very well delivered and it was very intensely received. Was at one point she said, "When you're here, it's like you're not here," and I realized I wasn't honoring the boundaries that when I left work I had to leave work behind, and something that I think I have to pay better attention to for myself, but also for the professionals in this district is Saturday don't check your work email. And it's easy to say don't do it on Sunday, but I think as an educator, like if you don't check your email at 7:00 on Sunday night, you break out in hives. But to have that separation and know that when you're somewhere with your family, that you're actually present there. And I'm so glad you brought up the example of your father making the Euro games, because it was always very important for me with my kids too, to make as many of their events. And I coached them growing up, and it was a huge sacrifice. And there's something you said where I actually wrote down the word sacrifice, and it was well worth it. I get the people who are like, "Oh, I wish I could do what you do. I just don't have the time." I'm like, yeah, I don't have the time either, there, fellow, but I make it. But it's being present for your kids. There's an enormous sacrifice, and it does pay off. And I'm largely out of coaching now because my kids are all older, but I'm glad I did it. And I've actually had the conversations about that. And they're like, yeah, we didn't always love having you there, but we appreciate it. I'm like, okay, good. And then what you said about letting your son go to school too, I think it's a natural parent instinct that we're kind of surprised that we survived, like growing up. Like, how did I ever make it out of being 12? Now, mind you, I was an idiot when I was 12, so I am pleasantly surprised that I made it. But it's so hard as a parent, and I think as a degree with your classroom as well, to let go. Like you've got to let kids go. And there's a great line from an Arthur Miller play, A View from the Bridge, which is a brilliant play. But if somebody makes the analogy, like if you nurse an injured bird back to health, you don't keep it in your hands. You have to let it fly. And I think for our own children, it's very difficult to let them fly. But even in the classroom too, it can be challenging because you want to structure everything, and I don't know, I guess maybe there's a control issue. But do you find with your kids, is it harder with? I never had a girl, but is it harder with a girl to let go, or is it? And birth order probably is a factor too. This might be my worst framed question ever, but like, do you get what I'm saying? Like, do you find that there are different challenges of letting go to let them just be independent?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. We talk about all the time that we're educating a room of 25 students, and every one of those 25 students is different, and they have different. Yes, there are similarities. They're all different in their own way. They all have different needs.
Yep.
It's no different than our own children at home.
Yep.
Whether you have 10 children, whether you have 2 children, each one of them has a different personality.
Yep.
And it's a matter of once you figure out that personality, figuring out how best to work with them, help them, support them. Your one child may need a different way of being spoken to, perhaps, or some help with organization, whereas the other child maybe organized beyond belief, but maybe something with responsibility, any number of things. So I think it's the same thing. How we look at our students year after year. Everyone is different. It's the same thing with our kids at home, and it's just a matter of playing to them the right way.
Yep. And I think I'm going to steal your thunder because we talked a little bit about the next question, but what you're describing too. I think with letting go is you have to let them not succeed, and that's really hard to do. And it's because we've all tasted that bitter taste of disappointment, and it resonates, but it's also part of the growth experience. So I'm gonna actually shut myself down because I know I'm totally trampling on an answer that you and I already kind of discussed, and I don't want to ruin it. So, what is the best advice you've applied, or could give, or both, to support parents, whether educators or not?
And this is a top. It's something that we talk about at orientation for our 6th graders, usually in August or in the May night when we meet with our parents, 6th grade parents. And I always preface this by saying that you as the parent, know what your child needs. You know best. So anytime I offer any kind of advice, it's based off of my experiences and 24 years of education. 13 years as a parent, there are a couple things that jump out. And the first is, and usually when I say this, if I have a screen behind me and the words are there, I put the word in quotes, let your child struggle. Mm-hmm. And, what I mean by that is, if this is an age here where they're going to experience difficulties. They're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Okay. No matter what we do, what parents do, that's going to happen. And we can't knock down every barrier in front of them. Yeah. We just can't. Yeah. That's we shouldn't be bringing homework in, Chromebooks in. If a student forgets their lunch, we will not let anyone go hungry here. But if you show up with their forgotten lunch, then how are they going to learn the lesson? I know my children wouldn't learn it that way. So I think the idea of letting them, experience some difficulties, and some people might throw their hands up and say, well, I want to advocate for my child. Absolutely. 100%. Listen, a parent should be their child's biggest advocate, without a doubt. Okay. But, I think there's a difference, between that and making sure your child is getting what they need to be successful, as opposed to you trying to be the one who removes that difficulty, let's say.
Yep.
So that's definitely one area where I just think that, again, making the honor roll, being the captain of a team, being the lead trombone in that section, all wonderful accomplishments, and we celebrate those things.
Yep.
Okay, but what I think the important thing is again, show me that good, kind person who accepts responsibility for their actions, and I'm going to show you a well-adjusted teenager who's ready to take on high school and beyond. Those are the important things. And if we remove too many barriers, there's not a greater chance of succeeding then if we do that.
Yeah, because you have to figure out. My father loved to make a reference to something that he got in Army training about: over the wall, around the wall, under the wall, through the wall. Like, just that whatever the barrier is, you have to find a way to surmount it or otherwise get around it. And it's very easy to say, and it's very hard to do because we care more about our kids than we care about anything else. And I explain to my boys that I could sooner explain the difference between blue and green to a blind person than I could explain to you guys what it means to me to be a parent. And that, with that in mind, like when you know your kid is struggling, you know your kid is hurting, like you want to do your role to like wipe that away. But yeah, it's almost like they need to experience the bitter in order to understand the sweet. And as you were talking, I was thinking about one of my favorite stories was my oldest son didn't make the middle school soccer team. He was in 6th grade, so it's not uncommon. And instead of crying about it, he walked down the hall, went to the cross country coach, said, "Can I still try out for the team?" And he ended up running. He lettered in cross country for 4 years in high school, and it was a very fulfilling experience. He made friends. He got to be quite good at it. And he took that initial disappointment. And he's like, "All right, here I go." And he kept playing travel soccer. He had a great experience with it, but he took that negative and he was able to find the positive. And I think for him that was a huge growth experience. I think for me as a parent, I kind of had that sniffle moment of, "Way to go, kid."
Absolutely. And honestly, there's certainly a few important moments in my life, but I think one of the biggest disappointments in my life helped to form who I am today. And you used to talk about getting cut from a team. I was cut from my freshman baseball team in high school, and I was always I played travel ball. I don't even know if you know this. I played in France.
I did not know that.
Yes, I played. We were going back, Jersey City in the '90s. Yeah. Travel ball really wasn't much of a thing, so we played all over the place, and we actually played in a tournament. We went over to France.
That's awesome.
And I got cut from my freshman year high school team. I went to St. Peter's Prep in Jersey City, and rightfully so. I didn't have a good tryout. So I was faced. I talked with my parents about it, and I was faced with a decision. Do I want to keep playing? Do I want to keep trying? Or am I going to give up? And I wanted to keep playing. I loved the game. I worked hard. I made the team. We ended up, I was pretty successful there. We won the county championship. We were ranked in the state my senior year. And then I went on to play college baseball. Yep. And that's something that I share with, I don't necessarily make that a public speech. It's when I talk with kids individually. Yep. And it's a story that I share with them because, again, Tom Coughlin wrote a couple of books, but one of them was called Earn the Right to Win. And it's actually something I discussed with some of the 5th graders yesterday with Read Across America. I read some excerpts from that book. Yep. And we talked about, earning the right to win, that things aren't just handed to you in life. And the earlier we learn that, the better we are. Like I said, more well-adjusted we are. How badly do you want something? Because if you want it, it's when you work hard, it may not always happen depending on the goal, but you're going to set yourself up for a pretty good chance of making it happen. And that would be one of the other things kind of leading into your original question in this segment is that when I was in college, my college coach, I distinctly remember we were talking about high school ball and some of the things that he always talked about through the recruitment process, and he always said that one of the most important things, and he even said it, if you have children someday, try to remember this, is that a parent should never be the reason your child makes or doesn't make a team, and they should never be the reason that they earn or don't earn playing time. Mm-hmm. And again, I've lived the travel scene as a player, as a parent now over the last few years, and the reality of it is, I want to say there's approximately 8 million high school athletes, student athletes, and only about 5% of them go on to play Division 1, 2, or 3 athletics.
Yeah.
That means that the very large majority are not. And too many times, I see it where, there's too much pressure put on these kids. And it's, listen, if your child is giving their best effort, if they're out there, they're trying their best, doesn't matter what sport it is, if they're trying, celebrate that. Trust me when I say enjoy those successes. They're not giving out Division I scholarships or major league draft position at a field on a Saturday afternoon at 2:00.
Yep.
And it's be in the moment. Support your child. Don't worry if they struck out 4 or 5 times in a game. Don't blast them for it.
Yep.
Trust me when I say they do not want to hear that in the car ride home.
Yeah.
You just be there to support them. Because again, I go back to my earlier comment, honor roll, team captain, all wonderful, great accomplishments, but let's make sure your child's happy. Make sure that your child is happy and they enjoy what they're doing.
Yeah. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got as the parent of youth athletes was to ask your kids at the end of a game, did you have fun? Win or lose, whatever you saw, performance on the field, did you have fun? And I still do that. I mean, Danny's 20 and he's playing in college now, but I think he looks at me kind of like, what are you doing? but it's really important because those athletic endeavors have to be fun. Your goal is to work hard and to be part of a team and something larger than you, but you really need to enjoy it. And I wasn't always the best. This is like the most soul-bearing podcast I've ever been a part of. It's like the 6th one, but like I look back as a parent too. Like even when my oldest son was taking driver's lessons, and my wife dropped him off at Hillview for something I can't remember what it was, and he was talking to the 2 of the teachers, and I said something to the teachers, and they were lovely to Andrew. I said, he won't drive with me, and they looked at him, and he just goes, he's too critical. And the 2 of them are, oh, we know what you're talking about. Like, really, I'm that bad? But just to realize, I offer constructive criticism where I think is constructive, but to know, what that line is. As an English teacher, I think our role is to be critical of the quality of writing we receive because we want to see revisions. And it's hard sometimes to realize as a parent, maybe he doesn't want his life picked apart. And I think about my own life. I don't think I'd like mine picked apart either. But I like that advice a lot too about that you shouldn't be the reason somebody gets something or doesn't get something, and that's important to keep in mind. And I mean you want to feel like whatever you've got to. I'm thinking as a kid, as a guy who played sports and whatever I did academically, I'd like to think that it was my doing.
Exactly. Yes.
I want to own it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Outcomes weren't always great, but they were still mine. Last question, and if we expand on it, it's fine. How do you want your kids to view you? And this applies to the ones who share your last name or those you support at work. But I think that's a really interesting concept to ponder. How do you want them to view you?
Yeah. There's a famous line by an ex-basketball player where he says, I don't want to be a role model.
Oh, Barkley.
Yeah. I wasn't a big Barkley fan, but it was a decent rebounder. But
yeah.
And listen, you can like it or not. Yes, you are.
Yep.
And here every day in the building, again, something that I talk with the staff about all the time is that we try to lead by example here. And I it's a challenge. It's kind of scary at some ways to think about, that for students to look up to all of us, but they do. They do, and it's a big responsibility. Teaching is not easy. It's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
What I want, and again, these are things that we talk about our back to school night, our orientation, is that, I want every student in the building to feel connected to an adult, at least one adult.
Yep.
And I want them to come in, and I want them to be, whether it's their science teacher or their counselor. Hopefully it's more. Hopefully it's many.
Yep.
But just to have at least one person who they know in the building, is there in their corner, and they can come to them for help if they needed anything, or just a shoulder to cry on. Just someone to share something with, a good piece of good news with. Kids are so excited, and that's one of the things that I love about middle school is that, for the most part, 8th grade starts to maybe die down a little bit because we're starting to get too cool and want to be freshmen. But so many of the kids are so excited to share things.
Oh yeah.
About whether it's their dog or their grandma's coming to visit from Florida, whatever the case may be, and those are the fun conversations that we get to have every day. With kids, so I want them to again view us, administration, the teachers, as not people who are here for be stickler of the rules, and we're reading this book and that's what we're doing today.
Yeah.
We're here for everything, and that's how we all try to operate in this building.
Yeah.
For my own kids, I'd hope that they view me as someone who, especially as they start to get older, start to get out there in life a little bit more, view me as someone who was there to support them, but also hopefully letting them choose their own path in life.
Yeah.
Granted, again, I was a baseball guy, so of course my son plays baseball, but 2 years ago he started wrestling. And he has had some pretty good success wrestling, and I feel like he maybe start to like wrestling a little bit more than baseball, and that's fine. that's fine. I really can't help him with wrestling because I wasn't a wrestler, but I want them both to know that my wife and I are there to support their endeavors, to keep them safe, to give them some advice, but to know that as long as they're happy, as long as they're pursuing something that they enjoy and want to, that we're good with that.
Yeah.
There's no pressure on you to do X, Y, and Z because that's what I did when I grew up.
Yeah. I don't want to see. Yeah. In my instance, I don't want to see Michael Portas Part 2. Like I want them. Granted, one of my kids shares my first name, but for them to have that support, to know. I could be my own man, and to move forward confidently. And again, we're empty nesters now, sort of. I mean, my kids are in college and they're home all the time. But for my kids to know that just because you can't see me doesn't mean I'm not in the backdrop. Like I like for them to kind of know like I'm a few paces behind, but I'm there, and I've got the safety net ready if you need it. Just so you know, if you heard me being bleeped out and just say a swear word, that was the bell. We're in middle school. I try not to practice an obscenity except when I'm driving. But it's funny. I posed this question to you. But I don't know. I think I said it like 5-6 days ago. Like I don't know how to answer this for my own kids. Like for the school side, what you just said is what I miss most about being in the classroom. And I love my job. I'm really happy with the career choice that I've made. But I do miss that aspect of interacting with kids, and I loved working with seniors because it kind of comes back. Like we're in 8th grade, they become too cool to tell you things. By the time they get to be sophomores, maybe juniors, like they kind of look at you like, I'll tell you stuff again. And the seniors, there was a tremendous openness, and they were on the precipice of so many exciting things in their lives. And I loved being that person who would listen. And sometimes they shared things with me that I wasn't comfortable with, where I might have been like, we should probably get somebody else involved in this conversation and steer them towards someone in guidance who can provide them better supports. But I always felt like I wanted them to know that whatever we're doing, whatever my role, like, I care about you. And you said it too about being a role model. There were days I would come into work and I was having a lousy day. I didn't sleep the previous night, whatever else it might have been. But the kids didn't need to know that. What they needed to know was Mr. Portas is here to care about me and to teach me about things and to help create a positive environment. I think, that supportive part, I think, as a parent and as an educator is the biggest piece. And you like how I just kind of spun that to be all about me instead of actually.
Hey, you're the host. So.
It's true, but a touch self-indulgent as a host, but a host is just the same. Is there anything else you want to put out there? I mean, I know I've taken up a lot of your time as well as Mrs. Noon's time. And
No, It's about as cliched as it gets, but I'll still put it out there. I just it's and again, like you said before, Mrs. Noon is it's a 1-year-old at home. It does go by fast.
Yep.
When I started here in Pequannock, and I've been teaching for 24 years, but this is my 10th year in Pequannock. When I started in Pequannock, my son was 3 and my daughter was 1.
Yeah.
And now I'm talking about my son going into high school and my daughter's going to go into 6th grade next year. It goes so fast.
Yeah.
It really does. I mean, like my son's done with rec sports now. He's moving into high school. It goes by so fast. So I know, if you work a full-time job and by the time you get home, if your child has something going on and you just, I wish I could just go on the couch and just, relax for a little bit.
Yep.
Go to that game.
Yep.
Just get to that game. Just be there because it's going to go by before you know it. And if you don't do those things, and all of a sudden you're going to wake up one day and they're going to be out of those activities and not doing them, and you're going to wish you did.
Yeah. And I mean, it's the slow days when my kids were little and we had our kids really close together in age, and people would say, "Oh, it goes so fast." I'm like, "No, every day is eternal." I'm like, "I haven't got a good night's sleep in 6 years." What are you talking about? But it does go by quickly, and I love seeing the parallel too. This is my 27th year as an educator, and I can honestly say I've never once woken up and thought, oh, I don't want to go to work today. Like literally never once. Now there are a lot of mornings of like maybe 10 more minutes in bed, but never have I had that feeling of dread. And there were some times during the pandemic response where I think we shared some moments of dread, sometimes at ungodly early or late hours, but we were here for the kids. We're here for the community and the family, and there's something that's very powerful to that. And I feel like as a parent too, it's a very similar thing where, yeah, you're going to be really tired, and you're going to pick yourself up off the mat, and you're going to be at that game, you're going to be at that concert, you're going to be at whatever the event is, because it really matters. And those days go by quickly. And I know I give you a lot of static because you have cost me thousands of dollars because I have to go to all my son's football games in the outer reaches of upstate New York. But it was a conversation in here when you just said, "No, you're going to everything." Okay, apparently I'm going to every game, and I don't regret it. I mean, my checking account might, but spiritually, soulfully, and just experiences my wife and I have shared, wouldn't trade it for the world.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that.
Sure.
And thank you so much to Mrs. Noon, who's been just a wonderful audience member. If any of you are having a bad day and you need to kind of like take it down a few notches, spend some time in her presence, and I guarantee you'll just feel a little bit better about life and your place in the world. So thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you found this useful and engaging, and we're working on a few more ideas for future podcasts. Thank you so much to Mr. Seborowski for giving up your time and sharing, I think, very meaningfully of your experiences.
Sure. Thank you.